After our slabs have been trimmed and formed to the shapes that we would want them to be, at that point on the Wonderstone, we had to remove the saw marks. The material is extremely soft, and so the wetter it is, the easier it is to break it, and so we have to be extremely careful. The first thing that I'm going to do is wet the slabs so that the surface softens. As the stabilizer that we would apply to it on the surface will let it soften. This is making its own mud slurry. I don't know if you can tell from the wheel, but it makes its own mud slurry. Trying it. It's much easier to do it with this grinding pad than it is by hand. And I'll be showing you the hand process in just a few minutes. That's pretty slick. Okay, now we've come to one of the most touchy segments of developing or producing the Wonderstone, and this is the grinding. This has to be done by hand on these big pieces because it has to be wet, as I mentioned earlier, which softens the stone. You have to create a mud slurry that will create a separation of the top of this beautiful stone. But after it's saturated and wet, transporting it is extremely technical because of the softness of the stone. And so it's not uncommon to get a slab to this point, this beautiful big slab, and be grinding it, and during that process, one of two things: either you crack it, and it has to be produced into smaller pieces, or when you're picking it up, you crack it. And so I promise you, if that happens, it'll be edited out of this, because the tantrum that I will throw if I break one of these gorgeous pieces of stone is you'll notice the shop's empty. I don't like to do this with anybody around. It is not uncommon to break one after you've gone to all this labor and all this effort, but it's the only way it can happen. So I've got both my grinding stone and my stone are saturated. I'm just going to create a nice slurry. This slurry, as I mentioned earlier, does two things. It removes saw marks. It also cleans the top surface any debris or dirt that might have connected to the stone after it has been submerged in the vat of glue that stabilizes this. You'll see how I'm just creating a slurry. The sloppier the slurry, the faster the action. And again, I don't want to go too far, because every time I do it, I remove more stone. This is not the final wash, but it's the one that I use to check and make sure that I have as many saw marks as is feasible to remove. It looks wonderful. Again, this is the most technical part here to make sure you don't break it. After it dries, it will be a little lighter colored, but isn't that incredible? Nature's most beautiful paintings. It'll go from here to a final wash. This piece does not have terrible saw marks, but the surface appears to have not been completely cleaned when it was glued or hardened. So therefore, there's a layer or a film of dirt. But in process, after grinding it, I can detect a few very small fractures, but I do not believe that they will be an issue once this stone is mounted onto a board. And that fracture was not visible before sanding. Again, nature's most beautiful paintings. This one we're going to grind. Again, the saw marks are not terrible. This is natural in the stone, so it will not come out, but this will. Try to show a close-up of the mud. You can see how, and I'll show another one after we have cleaned it. This one is the biggest one, the biggest risk, the biggest reward if we're successful. This is where we take our final step of what we consider our outside production. We will run our finished product through this washing apparatus. It washes from the bottom top from 4 different angles and does a pretty good job of cleaning. We do, however, try to run our material through it 2 times just to make sure that it's good and clean. Everything we produce goes through this, including, you'll notice these baskets here. These are sculptures that will be going through. After I run them through this wash machine, they will be set onto carts such as this one here. And these carts are then where the material sets until it's given ample time to dry, at which time it goes inside to the inside production people. The final wash.